Okay, so whenever we learn Tanakh, our sort of guiding principle is always that nivuah shehu tzricha ledorot huchteva. Any nivuah that was written down, it's because there is a relevant message for all future generations. So there certainly is a message that the Navi is giving over in his or her time, and there's also relevance for the future. So not every nivuah that every prophet experienced was recorded, and even those who, among the Nevi'im who were recorded, it's possible they had more prophecies that were not recorded. The ones that are recorded are because they have a relevant message. So whenever we approach the study of Tanakh, we're looking at it on two levels. What was going on then? We want to understand history, binu shnot dor vador. It's always good to learn what happened in the past. Part of learning part of the reason we learn what's in the past in order to apply it to the future. And what we're really looking for is, how is this relevant to me? What is this text saying to me in my time and place? So when Zamira asked me to think about a theme in the Megillot, I was thinking in terms of where we are today, the things that are on our mind, what are we focusing on as we study Tanakh today? And very prevalent in our minds, I think everywhere, but perhaps especially in Mitzpeh Yericho, where we live, is Mikdash is very, very much on people's minds. I think it's throughout Yehuda and Sharon. I don't know if it's only Binyamin, but in a lot of the intersection signs were posted, directing towards Har Beit Hashem, right? You've seen them? It's a brown sign with a little picture of the diagram of the Mikdash, and in which direction you need to be headed towards Har Beit Hashem. It's very uplifting, right? That there are traffic signs to Har Beit Hashem. So I know they're all over Binyamin. I think in the Gush also, right? I think there's one right outside of Beitar. When I come out from my son's apartment in the house of Beitar, there's a sign pointing towards Yerushalayim, Har Beit Hashem. When I come out of Mitzpeh Yericho, Har Beit Hashem. I saw one outside of Beit El. A lot of different intersections in Yehuda and Shomron. So we're getting closer. And this is something very, very much on our minds. We had in Mitzpeh Yericho, we experienced a loss last year, the loss of Aviad Naiman, Hashem Yikom Damo, and he was the one who was behind the whole push for Bayit B'chol Bayit, that every home should have a picture of the Beit HaMikdash. He realized when he was in Gaza that every home had a picture of Al-Aqsa, and he said, they know what they're fighting for, and we need to know what we're fighting for, and there should be a picture of the Beit HaMikdash in every home. And this is a movement that he started and has become very, very widespread, and a beautiful idea that every one of us should feel connected to the Mikdash. So this is what I thought about, and Mikdash is inherently connected with Malchut. If we think about the bracha that we say in Shmona Esrei for the rebuilding of Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim ircha v'rachamim tashuv, we ask Hashem to return to Yerushalayim, uvnei ota b'karov b'yameinu, binyan olam, v'chisei David avdecha mehira l'tocha tachim. I haven't started, so there might be some extra mehiras. And the idea of the Malchut is intrinsic to the building of Yerushalayim. You can't have one without the other. Mikdash and Malchut go together, and even though David gets a separate bracha of his own, it's Semach David Avdecha Mehirat Tatzmiach. I don't know. Ashkenaz also says so many mehiras, but Mehirat Tatzmiach, right? And then that's tied in with also a broader Yeshua. So it's not only about David, it's primarily about David. It's Semach David Avdecha Mehirat Tatzmiach, but we end with Ki Lishuatcha Kivinu Kol Hayom U'Mitzapim Liyeshua. That I know is unique to Nusach Sfard, right? We are awaiting the Geula every moment. That's Bigadol. So the restoration of the Malchut and the building of the Mikdash are definitely intrinsically connected. So those are the themes we're going to look at today. I would say that the sources that I brought from the Megillot are certainly not exhaustive because our time is limited. But it will give us a little tansit, a little bit of an idea of where we see these sources in the Megillot. Megillah, the word Megillah certainly originally comes from like liglol, so these were scrolls that were rolled up. That's what they have in common. Basically, there's no, Chazal don't define a theme that runs through all 5 Megillot. There were some questions about some of the Megillot, whether they were even to be included in Tanakh. Some of the decisions were later than others. Kohelet is certainly, there are a lot of questions about the status of Kohelet, even Shir HaShirim. So primarily in the vocabulary of Chazal, Megillah refers to Esther. And then the others sort of became included. But another meaning of the word Megillah, because they're all considered scrolls that are kept rolled up, but another meaning of Megillah is ligalot, to reveal. And in all of the Megillot, there are themes that are beneath the surface. In all 5 of these Megillot, I would say that's one thing. It's true in all of Tanakh, but I think especially so in the Megillot. It's so obvious from reading Megillot. If we just read them superficially, we're left saying, this is Tanakh? What's going on here? There must be something more to it. There's something going on beneath what I'm seeing on the surface. So that's really what we're doing here today, is to sort of reveal these themes that are lying beneath the surface. In the Sefer Ta'amei HaMinhagim, one other word of introduction. We're going to begin with Ruth, because I organized the Megillot, as do Chazal, chronologically, in the order in which they were written. The order in which they're printed in most of our printed Tanakhs is much more modern. It's hard to call the advent of printing modern, but it certainly comes later than the time of Chazal. Chazal ordered the Megillot in the order in which they were written, and later on, when they were printed, they became printed in the order in which we read them throughout the year. So it starts with Shir HaShirim, Ruth, Eicha, Kohelet, Esther. But I started with Ruth because Ruth was first. So what do we see from Ruth? There's no mention of the Mikdash in Ruth, but certainly there is great attention paid to Malchut. There's a very, very important principle of Malchut that is established in Megillat Ruth. In fact, we're told in Sefer Ta'amei HaMinhagim, which was published in Poland in 1891 and is a very, very encyclopedic record of all Minhagei Yisrael with the reasons behind them. So he says that the reason that we read Megillat Ruth on Shavuot is because Lefi Megillat Ruth nichteba al yidei Shmuel Hanavi leyaches et David HaMelech sheba meRuth HaMoaviyah kein min hashamayim hiskimu al hadavar. That this is a very broad, encompassing statement. The whole reason that Shmuel Hanavi wrote down Megillat Ruth is in order to provide a genealogy for David HaMelech, so that we know where David HaMelech came from. That's the whole reason for writing down Megillat Ruth. Obviously, there are other such sweeping statements about why Megillat Ruth was written. Chesed, Gemilot Chasadim is certainly a major theme in Megillat Ruth. But he says the reason is because Shmuel Hanavi wrote it down in order to provide a genealogy for David HaMelech, and he goes on to say that David HaMelech was born and died on Shavuot, and therefore we read Megillat Ruth on Shavuot. So if Shmuel Hanavi was prompted to write, and min hashamayim hiskimu al hadavar. This is something that, it wasn't that Shmuel Hanavi, maybe it was something that he thought about doing, but min hashamayim hiskimu al hadavar, he got like the seal of approval from Hashem. Yes, you need to write down Megillat Ruth in order to attribute the genealogy of David HaMelech, so we all know where he came from. Now, honestly, the genealogy of David HaMelech, in terms of where he came from, it's not so impressive. I think I once spoke about this on an OU summer program. Right? If you think about it, if you didn't know the players and somebody offered you a shidduch for your daughter and said, okay, I have a great boy for you. He's handsome, he's intelligent, he's, both poetic and courageous. He's got alamilas. There may be some things in his background you might be a little uncomfortable about. You might hear rumors. There was some incest in the family. There's some, he's go a few generations back. There was a questionable conversion. Is it legal? Is it not legal? And you're saying to yourself, I'm sure he's a great guy for someone else, right? this is the genealogy of David HaMelech. He comes from Ruth HaMoaviyah. Ruth HaMoaviyah, where is Moab from? Moab. This is a child born of a union between a daughter and her father, Lot and his daughter. So is this, do we really want to record this genealogy? Is this so much to David's credit to say he's descended from Ruth HaMoaviyah, and she's called HaMoaviyah throughout? Even after her conversion, why do we keep calling her? She's HaMoaviyah. It's like stressed. She's the one who came from Moab. What value is there in this? Clearly, there must be some positive value to it if it's so important that we know about it. Moreover, Ruth is credited as being the founder of the Malchut. If we remember the pasuk from Melachim Aleph, Perek Bet, when Bathsheba comes into Shlomo to tell him that Adoniyahu has set himself up as king, despite the fact that David has chosen Shlomo to be his successor, and Adoniyahu is staging a rebellion and has set himself up as king. Bathsheba comes in to speak to Shlomo. Vayakam hamelech likrata. The king gets up to greet her. Vayishtachula, and he bows to her. Vayeshev al kis'o. Vayasem kisei le'em hamelech. Vateshev limino. And he places a chair for the mother of the king, and she sits down to his right. And Chazal are a little bit puzzled by this, but le'em hamelech, why not le'imo? It already said Bathsheba, so usually if identifies the person, then we use a pronoun we know who we're talking about. But La'im HaMelech, and Rashi says, quoting Chazal, Amru Rabotenu, La'ima Shel Malchut, he Ruth. That Ruth was still alive when Shlomo took the throne, and he placed a chair for her as Aim HaMalchut, the mother of the kingship. Like she is the one who's behind everything. So again, what is it about Ruth that makes her the Im HaMelucha, the mother of the kingdom, and not just call her great-grandmother of the king? So the Shem Shmuel explains, and he says in the name of his grandfather, the Kotzker Rebbe, Hinei Zekeni Zecher Tzadik V'Kadosh, all the brachos that he heaps upon him, Mikotsk Amar, De'inyan HaMelucha Lo haya nimtza b'Yisrael, v'hayu tzrichin likach zot me'amon u'moav. He says, Melucha, and then he says, Ad kan dvarav, that's what the Kotzker Rebbe said. The Kotzker Rebbe was noted for speaking very briefly, concisely, and his words require explanation. So he said, Melucha was foreign to the Jewish people and had to be imported from Ammon and Moab. So the Shem Shmuel goes on to explain why. Because Am Yisrael is like one body, ideally, right? And you can't have one part of the body ruling over all the others. One arm is in charge of the entire body, right? It doesn't work. You can't. It doesn't. It's not. The body is meant to function equally. The right hand and the left hand. Okay, one might be a little stronger, might be a little weaker, but then there are other things that one can do that the other can't. It's meant to work in unison. Therefore, the Melucha had to be imported from outside. And from, of all places, from Moab, there was no other Malchut that could be imported from. The Midah of Moab, says the Shem Shmuel, is arrogance, Ga'ava. And that's what was needed for Malchut. A king has to be a little bit arrogant. Not a lot arrogant, a little. He has to have a certain pride in who he is. We've discussed this before, and I'm sure you're familiar with the idea. Melech shamochel al kvodo, ein kvodo machul. A king cannot compromise on his own kavod. Even if the king says, no, you don't have to stand up for me. It's okay. What do we have to do? Stand up for him. Right? Ein kvodo machul. His kavod cannot be forfeited. A king has to command a certain measure of respect. He says that was the problem with Shaul HaMelech. He was too humble, and he caved into the people. The people wanted to keep the sheep, right? The people wanted to. So therefore, he lost the Melucha because he didn't have that backbone that's necessary for Malchut. The Gemara tells us, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Kol makom she'ata motzei gvurato shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, ata motzei an batnuto, in source number 4. Everywhere, and the Gemara brings proofs from Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. In every part of Tanakh, anywhere where you see Hashem's Gvura described, in the same breath, it's followed by a description of his humility, of his modesty. For example, in Torah, Hashem Elokechem Hu Elokei HaElokim Va'adonei HaAdonim, and then immediately followed by Osem Mishpat Yatom Ve'almana. Despite the fact that Hashem is the superlative ruler of the world, God of all gods, master of all masters, nevertheless, he takes the time to come down and look at the individual situations, Mishpat Yatom Ve'almana, of those who are vulnerable in society. Hashem's grandeur, his greatness is always followed by humility. Ko amar ram v'nisa, shochein ad v'kadosh, etc., and followed by daka ushval ruach. Hashem is with those who are low in spirit, who are depressed. Hashem is there. He's above, but he's also immanent. He's here with us. And that's the balance that we needed in the Malchut. That unique balance, the anava, we have. That's intrinsic to OUisrael. It's one of the signs, right, of Jewish people. Rachmanim, Baishanim, and Gomlei Chasadim. We are, by nature, Baishanim and Rachmanim. We are people who care. We are people who are humble. We don't put ourselves forward. It's okay. You tell me what to do. It's fine. I'll do it what you want. But the king has to have that, you're not telling me what to do. I have to do what's best for my country. Right? I'm not going to do what you think is best for my nation has its needs, and I have directives from Hashem of how this land is meant to be run, not taking directives from other people, only from Hashem. So he has to have that firmness. That came from Moab. But it has to be balanced by his intrinsic nature. And this is characteristic of Ruth as well. Because Ruth, along with being called HaMoaviyah, she's called Hashava, which is very fascinating. It says in the pasuk, "Vatashav Naami v'Ruth HaMoaviyah kalata ima, Hashava mistei Moav." She who was returning, and she's called the same thing later on when Boaz is in his field and he sees this young woman who's gleaning the wheat, and he says, "Who is she?" And he's told by his helpers, she's Ruth, who Hashava mistei Moab, who returned from Stei Moab. And the Sefer HaTorah cites the question, which is asked by many Mefarshim, Haba'a mistei Moab, right? She's the one who came from Moab. What do you mean she returned from Moab? In order to return to somewhere, you have to have started from that place. Ruth was from Moab. She's Ruth HaMoaviyah. But no, says Rav Eliyahu Kitov in Sefer HaTorah, Hashava mistei Moab el mekoma hishava. She was really coming back to the place from which her neshama originated. Neshamahi min hanefashot she'asa Avraham. In this week's parsha, we're told, right? Et hanefesh asher asu b'charan. That Avraham megayeret ha'anashim v'Sarah megayeret et hanashim. So what happened to all those people? And the Zohar says that these are the souls of all people who return to Judaism. All the people who convert to Judaism are actually returning because they are the souls that were converted by Abraham Avinu to monotheism. So she was, in a sense, returning to who she was. So Ruth is the embodiment of that balance between anava and ga'ava. The anava she gets as being a neshama that was taught by Abraham and Sarah, and the ga'ava she gets from Moab. And together, she becomes the personality who is fit to be Eim HaMelucha.
Why is Moab the epitome of God?
Moab, that's a whole discussion unto itself, but Moab is. We see from their midot that they are the epitome of Gava. They're the ones who didn't allow OUisrael to cross through their land, even though they said, we'll stick to the Derech HaMelech and we'll pay you and it'll be good for you. No. It's ours. You can't come near it. And they refused. Not only did they were also the epitome of cruelty. They refused water, and according to Midrash, not only refused water, but gave them salted water to drink, and they became and enticed them to adultery. Moab is altogether a very, very corrupt Malchut. If you think of Moab, you think of Balak Melech Moab, who brought Bilam in to curse Bnei Israel. They're really so antithetical to what we would expect in terms of where is a Jewish king going to come from. Moab is the embodiment of all the midot that we would expect to say, don't be like that. But there was some good that had to be found. I think you were talking a little bit earlier about how, being in the darkest place, good was uncovered. And all those videos, it's Omer Shem Tov and Bar Kuperstein and Or Levi and so many, Segev Kalfa, one after another, and after another. I can't also, they're gripping. They're absolutely gripping of how they discovered Hashem in the darkest of places. And this is a little bit of that nikudah, of from that darkness comes this incredible light. Okay, so that's root and the beginnings of the Malchut. And only once the Malchut is firmly established and all of the enemies of Israel have been eliminated under David, Shlomo is authorized to build the Beit HaMikdash, to fulfill his father's dream and build the Beit HaMikdash. And the Zohar tells us that on the day that the Beit HaMikdash was completed, that's the day that Shir HaShirim was revealed to the world. Shir HaShirim is called Kodesh HaKodashim, taken from the language of the Beit HaMikdash, just like the physical structure of the Beit HaMikdash has a Kodesh and a Kodesh HaKodashim. So we're told, Kol HaShirim Kodesh, V'Shir HaShirim Kodesh HaKodashim. It's compared to the holiest point in the sanctuary, Shir HaShirim, among all biblical poetry. So Shir HaShirim is a sweeping portrait of the history of the Jewish people. And Rashi explains that from the beginning of time to the end of time, and Shir HaShirim is this incredible love between Hashem and Bnei Israel. And it is a complicated love story, as you just heard. Relationships are complicated. Even loving relationships, or perhaps particularly loving relationships, are complicated. People we don't care about so much are less complicated. when we're in a loving, caring relationship, then everything is so much more potent. So Shir HaShirim is an expression of that love and the complications of being in a loving relationship. And really the way Rashi reads Shir HaShirim, or the way Rav Aviner Shlitza reads Rashi, Rav Aviner in his commentary on Shir HaShirim describes how Shir HaShirim is really a description primarily of Am Yisrael in Galut and the complications that ensue when our relationship with Hashem is disrupted, and how He's looking for us, and at the time when He's looking for us, we're busy with other things, and then when we're looking for Him, He's turned away, and it just keeps going along those lines, like what happens to Am Yisrael in Galut. So why would this be revealed? Why is this so holy, and why was it revealed on the very day when the Mikdash was built, on the day when the sanctuary is put up, and they're having this beautiful Chanukah Habayit celebrating the manifestation of Hashem's presence on earth among Bnei Israel, and all of a sudden we're talking about, well, there's going to be exile, and you're going to be looking for Him, and He's not going to be available, and He's going to be looking for you, and you're not going to be available, and why bring all this up? And in a way, Shlomo HaMelech is saying it's really because in the end, we have to be seeking Hashem. And if we are truly seeking Hashem, and his message is that if you truly seek Hashem, the way you did until now, and waited for this Mikdash to be built, and we were all waiting with anticipation until this Mikdash was built, then ultimately you'll be reunited with Hashem, despite all the difficulties that it's hard to think about in this moment of ecstasy and enthusiasm. We're so thrilled with the building of the Beit HaMikdash, but that thrill doesn't hold. Anytime there's this experience with a high, what happens when you come down off the high, right? How do we keep it going? Keeping it going is much more difficult. And he's saying right from the outset, I want you to know, keeping it going is going to be difficult. But at the same time, as know it's going to be difficult, know that it's in your power to make this a successful relationship. So some of the psukim in Shir HaShirim that are understood as references to the Beit HaMikdash, and I really selected the psukim sort of within a theme. There are psukim in Shir HaShirim, there are other psukim that talk about the Mikdash, also psukim about the Mishkan and Shiloh, but I found there's a series of psukim that are all understood by the Mefarshim as referring to the Mikdash, and those are psukim that describe a garden. Uri Tzafon in source number 7, Perek Daled. It's the last pasuk of Perek Daled and the first pasuk of Perek Hey. They go together. The division into prakim is not internal. It was imposed externally. So really those psukim are a unit. Uri tzafon uvoi teman, hafichi gani, yizlu b'samav, yavo dodi legano, v'yochal pri megadav. These are the words of the Yavo Dodi Legano is the words of the female voice in Shir Hashirim. May my beloved come to, may he return to his garden and eat its wonderful fruits. And the beloved responds, Bati Legani Achoti Kala. I'm here already, and I'm already enjoying the wonderful fruits. And Rashi explains that here, this Uri Tzafon Boi Teiman, Hashem is awakening the goyim. Hadugma al shem shahagaluyot mitkabtzot. There's a kibbutz galuyot here. Mikol hagoyim mevi'im otam minchal Yerushalayim. Everybody is coming to Yerushalayim, bringing offerings. Bimei habinyan yiyu Yisrael nikbatzim sham lamoadim ve'leragalim. At the time when the Beit Hamikdash will be rebuilt, Bnei Yisrael will come to Yerushalayim from all over the world, all different parts of the world. Moadim on holidays and aliyah laregel. And Yisrael responds, Yavo dodi legano, imatasham hakol sham. And we respond, it's interesting because it's really very much like what we see today. There is a certain concept today. People say, I'm doing aliyah la-regel. There are families, I once spent, many years ago, before we made aliyah, we spent Yerushalayim in the Old City, Yerushalayim in the Old City. We spent Sukkot in the Old City, and we saw family after family coming. They had made T-shirts, printed T-shirts with the family, and like Aliyah LaRegel 57, whatever it was at that time. And it's a thing. Like people have this concept. We're going up to Yerushalayim on Regalim and Moadim, but ma chaser lanu. So we think we're great. People are coming on Aliyah. Right? Where are they going? They're going to the Kotel. Right? They're going on tours around the old city. Maybe the tours of the tunnel. It's amazing. They're not going to the Mikdash. Something is chaser. But there is going to be that period of time where there's a kibbutz galuyot, people are coming from all over, and at the same time, we're saying, but yavo dodi legano, Hashem, we want you to be there too. And we need to be saying that. And when Hashem responds, when we express our desire, yavo dodi legano, Hashem says, bati legani. And Rashi says, bimei chanukat habayit, I'm already there. I've been there, and there's in Shir Hashirim we see that I've been there all along. Hashem is mitzitz ben hachalonot, right? Hashem is looking through the cracks, and that's an understanding. Chazal say from there that the Shechina never departs from the Kotel Hamaravi. Hashem's Shechina is always present at the Kotel. It's just behind the curtain, so to speak. Bati legani, but you have to look for it, and that's what Rabbi Aviner says, Ribono, we're saying in Pasuk Tetzayin, in the end of Perek Daled, Ribono shel olam me'orer otanu min hatzafon u'min hadarom. Hashem is waking us up from all the different places in the world, from the north and from the south, the Ashkenazim, the Sfaradim, all the different places we've ended up in the Golah. And at the second part of the Pasuk, Bnei Yisrael respond, Yavo dodi legano v'yochal pri megadav, anu mishtokekimu mitzapim she'HaKadosh Baruch Hu yachzor eleinu. We are so longing for Hashem himself to return. It's very exciting that Hashem is bringing all these people back to Eretz Yisrael. But Hashem, we want you. And he says, we need that sipiyah. Kach acharei churban harishon v'acharei hachurban hasheni, ze ikar ha'emunah v'lazeh anu mishtokekim. This is an ikar emunah that we are awaiting. We are awaiting Hashem's revealed presence. And this is what we are longing for. And we have to be able to express that longing. Further in Shir Hashirim, the next mention of the Gan is Ana halach dodech, the Bnot Yerushalayim. Fascinating discussion. Who are the Bnot Yerushalayim? The Bnot Yerushalayim express their willingness to help the woman find her beloved. And they say to her, well, where'd he go? Hayafa banashim. Ana panad dodech, unevakshenu imach. We'll look for him, but tell us where to look. Where should we search for him? I just saw an interview with Bar Cooperstein. He said they asked him, his captors asked him in Gaza at some point, so where's your God? It was shortly in the beginning, shortly after October 7th. Where is your God now? And of course they were mocking him. But he said he took the question seriously, and he started asking himself the same question. And we saw a lot of a lot of the Chatufim, the Shavim, ask themselves that question. Where is Hashem? And many of them discovered Hashem there, but he already knew a little bit about Hashem from his home. And he said, and I thought about it, and he said, of course, one answer is, first, initially, I felt a little sad and a little depressed, like maybe they're right. Where is Hashem? Maybe he has abandoned me. But he said, no, I know that's not true. I know Hashem is within. I thought to myself, and listen to this, I thought to myself, what would my mother say?
Wow, yeah.
The importance of the impact a mother has on a child. He said, I thought to myself, what would my mother say? And I came up with, I thought what she would say to me. She would say, Hashem is with you, he's just testing you. And he said, and that carried me through. I felt the whole time I was there, he said, I felt that Hashem was with me, but testing me.
Oh, testing.
It's a nisayon. That this was, Hashem is with you, but this is a nisayon for you. And that's what got me through the whole time. That this vision of my mother saying Hashem is there, he's just testing you. So this idea of where is, so the Bnot Yerushalayim say, where is your beloved? And she responds, Dodi yarad legano. He went down to his garden, la'arugot habosim, lir'ot baganim, to graze his sheep in the gardens, plural, vililkot shoshanim, and to gather shoshanim, lilies or roses. Ani ledodi v'dodi li haroeh b'shoshanim, and we're still, he's mine and I'm his. Despite the fact that he's there and I'm here, we're still ani ledodi v'dodi li. We're still connected. And Rashi explains, Dodi yarad legano tziva lanu livnot heichalo v'haya sham imanu. What's Gano? What is his garden? His garden is the Beit HaMikdash. Hashem told us to build the Mikdash, and we were there together. La'arugot habosem, the place where the TORAH was offered, the Besamim. And he went lirot baganim, and he went to graze in other gardens. Baganim asher nafutzu sham otam shelo alu min hagolah, mashresh chinato aleihem bevatei knesiot ubevatei midrashot. Hashem is present not only in the Beit HaMikdash, but even after the destruction of the Beit HaMikdash, there are other gardens, smaller gardens, further away. And here, Rashi says, he is referring to the Batei Midrash and Batei Knesset of those Jews who did not return with Ezra at the time of the building of the second Beit HaMikdash. So Hashem came down to his garden. His primary garden is the Beit HaMikdash, but he also has other little gardens further away, which are those in which we study and learn even outside of Eretz Yisrael in the Gola. Later in the Perek, we find again a reference to a garden. El ginat egoz yaradati, lirot ba'abei hanacha, lirot haparcha hagefen hanetu harimonim. I went down to the nut tree garden. And Rashi here says, again, El ginat egoz yaradati, od ze midivrei shchina. Here the shchina is still speaking. Hinei bati el mikdash sheni. Here, behold, I came to the second Beit HaMikdash. And then Rashi goes into a rather lengthy discussion and he says, I came to the Beit HaMikdash to see, lirot ba'abei hanachal. I came to see, are there ma'asim tovim that will sustain this Mikdash? Are there Talmidei Chachamim? Are there people who are engaged in the study and the teaching of Torah? Are they going to be able to keep this Mikdash going? Are there Mekaimei Mitzvot, Mele'ei Zchuyot, people who are full of mitzvot? And then Rashi discusses why is this specifically a nut garden? So he says there are aspects of a nut which are similar to Yisrael. Lama nimshalu Yisrael egoz. Ma egoz ze ata ro'eh oto kulo eitz. Ve'en nikar b'tocho putzo. You don't see the goodness of the nut. When you look at a nut, nuts in their shells are generally not so appealing. And they have this very hard, like woody-looking shell. Like think of an almond, for example. It's very rare that we see almonds being sold in their shells. The shell is hard, it's tough, it's unappealing. But inside, it's yummy, and it's also very nutritious. Right? It's so good for us. And we don't see it from the outside. So he says, so too, that's the midah of Yisrael. And now think about this balance, the harmony that Ruth reflected of being one thing and the other at the same time. It may be tough and unappealing on the outside, but so good on the inside. And we don't brag about it. Our goodness is hidden inside. There's goodness, there's Masim Tovim, there's Rachmanut, there are so many wonderful qualities of Am Yisrael, but they're hidden. And we don't necessarily have to show them off to the world. Ein mitpa'arin la'achriz al shivchan. We don't need to be praised for who we are. We know who we are. Yisrael are tznu'im. And the second thing that he says there, Od kama midrashot, he says there are a lot of different ways to understand this, but one more that he brings is a nut, because it has such a hard shell, can fall to the ground, and it can be sunk into the mud. It could be stepped on, right? And yet, the inner core remains edible. It's still good. You just have to crack open the shell. The shell is protective. So that's also Yisrael bein ha'umot. We suffer a lot. But then, wow, when you open the shell, what's inside is